Today we'll be making a large floral painting in the style of Georgia O'Keeffe.
Hi second graders, welcome to our next MAA lesson. Today we're going to be learning about the artist Georgia O'Keeffe. She was a famous American artist. She grew up in Wisconsin, and a lot of artists are inspired by their environment. So she soon moved to New York City to study art. And here's an example of one of her paintings. So you can see that she was obviously very inspired by the architecture and the East River here. She is most well known for her time that she lived in New Mexico, however, and she loved painting landscapes. So look at her style of how she decided to paint these landscapes. Really soft, organic shapes, smooth gradations. Something else that she is very well known for are these, she loved going into the desert and finding old bones from animals. And she would paint them a lot of times just looking at the shapes, the beautiful shapes in those bones. And then here you can see that she combined it with a little bit of a landscape element. And are mountains that blue? No, but that's how she decided to paint it. Very artistic and gorgeous. This is one of my favorite paintings of hers. She is also very well known for her florals. That's what we're going to focus on today. These gorgeous, really high, if you look at the scale that she painted, a lot of her florals are very large. Another defining characteristic of her florals, well, again here, some more large flowers. You can see that it's not just even that it's one flower taking up the entire canvas, but it's even just part of a flower. That's how she decided to get into all those details. She's also, one of her characteristic artistic elements is gradation. So let's see, let me show you the next picture here. For gradation, sometimes it helps to look at a black and white image. So this is something in one of her paintings. So you can see the high contrast area between the white and the black, and then all these soft gradations from the darks through the lighter grays up to the lightest gray. So that is one very big defining characteristic of her work, and something we are going to try to achieve today. I will also show you an example in color. So here's a painting she did called Oriental Poppies, and you can see like these soft color changes from these oranges into these darker oranges into the reds, and also these pink tones, lighter pink to deeper pink. So I will show you how to achieve looks like that. Let's also talk about the materials for today. So we have our brown paper. We have heavyweight watercolor paper with our information on the back, oil pastels, our palette with the brush, cup of water, pencil, and then a little bit of paper towel helps for the paintbrush. And then I like to have a piece of scratch paper. You can go get something from the recycle bin. And this is just when you are mixing your colors and you want to test them out on a scratch piece of paper, it's helpful rather than going straight to your artwork. So if everyone wants to get out all their supplies, and then we'll get on to our first step. Okay, now that we have all of our supplies out, on our piece of paper in a horizontal or landscape format, so this way, right? Not tall, but we're going to have it go across. I want you to think about where you want the center of your flower. A lot of times Georgia O'Keeffe put it off center, meaning not right in the middle. You can see from these examples. Okay, this one is definitely lower than the center. And we are going to create one large floral that extends off the edges of the paper. See how she did that? It extends off the edges. So make it really big. Now, I want you to think about the type of flower that you'd like to create. So you don't have to specifically think about a rose or a daisy, but think more about shapes. So here's 2 examples, okay? And see how the shapes of these petals are very different than the shapes of these petals. So think about what kind of shapes. You could even kind of create one that is a combination of both of these if you want, or something very different. So what I chose to do for my shapes is kind of go off the theme of an oriental poppy. So you can see I have a lot of really curvy lines. And again, look how big this one flower is going off the edges. Also, once you have all of your petals drawn out, then you can add some elements like some leaves, or I have a little bud over here, and then leave some, we call it negative space. So at least one area of your artwork that has just background, plain background. Okay, so I can't wait to see what all of your inspired shapes are. With your pencil, now that you have wherever you want your composition to, the center of your flower to be, that's your composition, start drawing your petal shapes and then add in any kind of leaves or other details. I love this example. See how she created this space over here with these organic shapes? So think about any details like that that you might want to add into your artwork. Now when you're drawing, I want you to draw lightly. Think of your pencil as a feather and draw really lightly. So everyone go on to that step and then we will talk about color. Okay, now everyone should have all their pencil lines drawn in and we can talk about color. So here's the color wheel. So you can focus on the colors on the outside here. You have your warmer colors and your cooler colors. If we want to create high contrast, we can focus on color. So high contrast are complementary colors which are across from each other on the color wheel. So Christmas colors, red and green, high contrast. Violets and yellows, high contrast. You can also create high contrast in your artwork by the darkness or lightness. Look at the high contrast of the center of these flowers versus when you go out to these lighter tones here. So think about the color palette that you want to create. If you did high contrast, here's an example of a palette. You can also do colors that are more analogous with each other. So next to each other on the color wheel, this could be a palette, for example. I chose to go off from this inspiration. I love this palette. So here are the oil pastel colors that I chose for my flower. And what I want you to do is I want you to trace a few of your lines, not all of them, but a few of them with colors. Now we're not filling in big spaces with our oil pastel because we're going to paint those larger spaces, but this is just to add a little bit more kind of texture to our artwork. So you can see I chose to put in the purple, the blue, black in the center with a little dash of pink. And that's all the oil pastel that I'm going to apply. So I also want you to look at how I drew this. There are areas, for example here, where I have a thicker bit of line and then it goes to a thinner bit. Here you can see how thick this purple line is versus this area. So the more that you vary and have that kind of variation in your line weights, so how thick or thin, it gives your artwork a more natural look for the flower. So I'd like everyone to choose their palette, whatever colors for the oil pastels that you'd like, and trace some of the lines, some thin, some thick, and then we'll go on to painting. Okay, now that we're finished with our oil pastels, we're going to go on to painting. So what I want to show you here is look at this petal and look at all of the different colors that you have within one petal. So you have this beautiful mauve that goes into a blue and a deeper blue, and then like a gray blue tone, all in one petal. So how we achieve that type of gradation, not only from color to color, but also value, lightness to darkness, is we not only use the set palette here, but we want to mix our own colors. So I used a lot of water and combined two different colors usually. If you mix more than two colors, a lot of times you get more of a muddy color. So you can see here, these are the colors that I mixed on the side of my palette here. Make sure that this area is clean before you start your new palette too. Otherwise you'll get the muddy colors. So I use a combination of these mixed colors and then some of the pure pigments from this side. So you can see I started to paint in some petals. So when I'm painting, I will use some of my mixed color, and I'll start in one area, and then I'll go to a pure pigment like red and mix it into this area, so you get this beautiful color blending that happens. Also in certain areas you want to just stay with the same hue, the same color, but you want it to be a little bit darker in one area and lighter in one area. So how you do that is you use your mixed color and then go get a lot of water on your brush and just do water for part of it, and you'll get this blending of the pigment into the water area. So I'll demonstrate one area here. Also, I should note too that I started with this petal space, then I jumped to this petal space. So while this was wet, I went to a totally different zone of my painting. So now I'm going to jump to I'll go to this petal. And since I have a little bit of the blue here, I'm going to use this color. I'm going to start painting in this area, and then I'm going to mix in a little bit of a different type of blue. And I'm going to get more intense with my color because I went right to the pure blue. Maybe I want it a little bit more intense up here and here. And then I get a lot of that pigment off my brush, so it's just wet with water. And then I'm painting in these zones, and you can see how you get the blending effect. Now in certain areas, let's see here. See how that works? Now I want a little bit more pure pigment. Actually, you know what? I want to bring in a little bit of lavender, or the violet into here. So then I mix in a little bit, and again I go and clear off my brush, and then I bring this violet. See how I'm kind of dragging the violet into different zones, and it mixes together. So there's no, and then I'm clearing off my brush on my paper towel here. There's no right or wrong way in all the different results. I mean, it's really pretty however you do it. But see how within one petal you can get so many different looks and variation of your color. See how I'm dabbing on my paper towel, and then I'm mixing and blending my colors, and I'm just in one petal space right now. So I'll give a close-up on that so you can see, again, one petal. Look at all the variation in color. Okay, so you can fill in all of your petals, again, skipping around. So while this is drying, then I'll go to maybe this petal space. And then when you do the background or the leaves, any other elements that you created, think about contrast. So look at how light the background is around this flower. So that's what I'm going to do, a similar type of thing. So if I have a darker type flower, then I'm going to do a lighter background. Okay, so everyone can get painting.